Well, it's an absolutely lovely day for a camp out. We've got a Dakota fire hole and a skillet. I've got some firewood. We're going to have a lovely camp out. Some wine, which is homemade. It's got a lot of fizz in it. There we go. Yum, yum. Delicious. We got our skillet. The fire seems to be going. That's nice. Let's get a bit of oil. Some meat. Some beef. Let's put this on. And let that cook for a while. Let me show you the place. Just look at this lovely A-frame. It's got a tripod of 4 beams and one across. The one across has these 2 sheets tied to it. There's the one down, one across, and one over here. There is our Dakota fire hole cooking. You can see we've got a hole to feed the flames with, to feed the fire with. Our meat is beginning to cook quite fast. Lovely. Nice. Got to be careful with these things, they can get very hot. There we go. Now we'll let that cook. Lovely, lovely. We've got some cabbage. A knife. So there's our cabbage, some onions, we've got a butternut squash, we've got some potatoes, garlic, so there's a clove of garlic, another clove of garlic, so there's the garlic, potatoes, and we've got some boiling water. Let's get a cup and be civilized with our drinks. I think I'm just going to move the camera. As I say, what I'd like to talk about today, which I consider a subject of importance, is I know that many people consider the New Testament their book, but how many people consider the value of the Old Testament? Do most people consider the Old Testament to be a Jewish book? I don't know. I mean, how much importance do we give that book? Well, I'm not going to beat about the bush. I regard that book not as a Jewish book. Yes, a Jewish book at first. God used the Jews as guinea pigs, the nation of Israel as guinea pigs, to try out, his laws and statutes, etc. on them. But all his laws and statutes were meant for the world. They were meant for me. They were meant for everybody. And so I don't regard the Old Testament as a Jewish book. I regard it as my book. Now, I wonder how many of you could ever say that out loud. The Old Testament is my book. Genesis 1:1 is written for me. The last verse of Malachi, which I think talks about, he shall turn the hearts of the children to the fathers and the fathers to the children, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. That's written for me. The life of David, King David, and King Saul is written for me. It's written for me as much as it's written for Goldstein or Epstein or Goldsmith. I don't regard that God would write a book so important, take 10 commandments and just write them for a small nation of Jews. And anyway, the Jews were only one of 12 tribes. The other 10 tribes got lost. So you could be an Israelite, a lost tribe of Israel. I could be, who knows? We don't know where they got lost to. So when people think that the Jews are the only Israelites, that's totally false. But that aside, I take that almost everything that's written, the life of David wasn't written for, a Cohen. It was written for me. I take inspiration from the life of David and Saul and Samuel and Gideon and Samson, to think that their lives were written for A.B. Sachs. It was written for A.B. Sachs, but it wasn't just written for A.B. Sachs. It was written for me and A.B. Sachs. Now, it was tried out on A.B. Sachs, and the Israelites didn't do a very good job of obeying the Old Testament. But if the Old Testament is God's book, surely it was written for me. So, I don't know if at the end of this little few minutes we have together, you will be convinced and be saying, like I say, the Old Testament is not for Finkelstein or Finkel. It is for me, Stephen Thomas. That book was written for me. And yes, they got a chance to try it out first. They kind of messed up. That doesn't mean God hates them. We all mess up. I love the Jews. But I'm saying that many people just regard the Old Testament as a book that was written to the Jews, and that it's got no relevance to themselves. Now, I want to give as an example. They're so-called Jewish feast days. And one of those feast days is the feast on the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, is a feast called the Feast of Debris Shelters. Now, I love debris shelters. I love anything to do with stealth camping. And when I see a feast that's a Feast of Debris Shelters, oh wow. I especially want to say that's a feast for me. And if you read about it, it's mentioned in Leviticus 23, starting in verse 39. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And you shall take you on the first day, now listen to this, the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. And what they were told to do was, with those trees and branches, they were told to make a stealth shelter and sleep in it for 7 days. They're not just taking those branches, they're making a stealth shelter just like my stealth shelter. And it says, and you shall keep it a feast unto the Lord 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month, and you shall dwell in booths. Now, the word booth is actually a debris shelter. 7 days, all that are Israelite born shall dwell in booths. Now, you would say, okay, so doesn't that just prove my point? It's only those who are Israelite born that shall dwell in booths. And then it continues, that your generation may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Now, doesn't that almost definitely say that this was just for the Jews, and it was a commemoration of the day that God took them out of Egypt? But then if you go to Zechariah 14, verse 16, it talks about the end time when Christ returns. It says, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came up against Jerusalem, that's at Armageddon, there's going to be a small remnant of people left, shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of tabernacles, or booths, or debris shelters. This is Zechariah 14, verse 17. And it shall be that whosoever, now this is the nations, the Gentiles, will not come up of all the families of the earth, not the Jews, unto Jerusalem to worship, shall there be no rain. So the Gentile nations who don't keep the feast of booths or debris shelters are not going to get rain. Take as an example, and if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be a plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles or debris shelters. The heathen are commanded when Christ returns to come up and keep the Feast of Debris shelters. And Zechariah 14:19, and this shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations. Does that sound like it's just the Jews? That come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, and they found written in the law, which the Lord had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the seventh month. So Zechariah tells us clearly that the Feast of Tabernacles is for all nations, and it's definitely a thing that's in the future. All nations are going to be coming up to keep the Feast of Debris shelters. Egypt among them, but all nations is mentioned. And that just goes to prove my point that if something as Jewish sounding as the feasts of the Jews, or the feasts in Leviticus 23, if in those feasts they come up, if Gentiles are told to keep those feasts, can you see why I say that those feasts are for me? And those feasts, I believe, are for now. They were for everybody forever. So why would God just command his test case to keep the feasts? They don't keep it. And the test case, all the things that were done for Israel were as a test for all the world. Israel was supposed to be the prototype for the rest of the world to follow them, follow their good example, see how blessed they were keeping the laws of God and living by the ways of God. And then everybody was supposed to do it. And that's where the New Testament came in. The blessings commanded to Israel, to the Goldsteins, to the Greenbergs, to the whatever, were going to be spread among everybody. And that is how the New Testament changed. It just changed and made it available to everybody. So the Old Testament was not a book written to the Jews. It was written to the people of the world who would eventually come to God through the new covenant. Now, a very interesting place is Nehemiah 8, verse 15, 16, and 14, where it says, this was in the days of Nehemiah. They'd just come back from captivity in Babylon. And they'd gone into captivity because they refused to obey God. And they came back and they found a book of the law, meaning they found a Bible. And in it they read Leviticus 23, which I've told you about. And they found written in the law, which the Lord had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the seventh month. Nehemiah 8, verse 15. And that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go forth unto the mount, and fetch olive branches, and pine branches, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of thick trees, to make booths, as it is written. So the people went forth and brought them, and made themselves booths, or debris shelters, every one upon the roof of his house, and in their courts, and in the courts of the gates of God, and in the streets of the water gate, and in the streets of the gates of Ephraim. And all the congregation of them that were come again out of captivity made booths, and sat under the booths. It says here, for since the days of Joshua the son of Nun unto that day had not the children of Israel done so. So that it says quite clearly that the children of Israel had not kept the Feast of Booths. Right until their captivity, they had not kept the Feast of Booths, as it was commanded for them to do. And so they all built their debris shelters, and they dwelt in them, and they rejoiced. They had a fantastic time after they'd come back from the captivity in Babylon. So my feeling is, as I say, this book, everything in the Old Testament is for me. And if God is going to enforce the keeping of the Feast of Debris shelters in the future, hey, I'm going to take it that it was meant to be kept in the interim, from the time it was commanded, and from the time that everything was opened up to the rest of the world, which is the New Testament and the New Covenant. Everything that God had offered the Harrises and the Shapiros was now offered to me. And yeah, and if there's a feast of debris shelters, I don't need any more. I don't need any second invitation. I'm going to keep it. And this is why I invite you, if you're at all interested. The Feast of Debris Shelters this year is starts on the full moon after the equinox on the night of the 10th of October. I might even stay in the same booth that I built, or go and I'll build one in my backyard, stay in it, and camp out for 7 days. And it's not like we're trying to be legalistic. I love stealth camping, and I can't promise that there'll be a blessing, but I know that if God went to all the trouble of instituting people of the world, back then the Jews, in the future the whole world, to stay in booths, I want to enjoy the benefit of staying in debris shelters, right, even up to the time when Christ will return and enforce his laws. So when Christ returns, he's just enforcing the laws that he actually wanted to be kept all along, which aren't being kept, and weren't even kept by the Jews right up to the time they went into captivity. It says that they didn't keep it. For the first time, they kept it when they came back from their captivity in Babylon. And if it's in the Bible, it was meant for them to be kept. And if it says that the Gentiles are going to be keeping it in the future, and I'm a Gentile, then I want to keep it now. That book, everything in it, I will take it as mine. It wasn't just written for the Wisemans and the whatevers. It was written for the Thomases and for me, Stephen. So there's my story. I want to invite you to say, the Old Testament, it's my book. Everything there was written for me. And if it encourages us to dwell in debris shelters, God must have had a good reason for it. I don't know all the reasons. I just know I love staying in debris shelters. I don't need any encouragement. And if you want to give me that date, the 10th of October 2022, then I will do it that day, and I'll do it for 7 days as God commands, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure I'll learn a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it as I always enjoy stealth camping. So, how do you like this meal? How do you like our Dakota fire hole? Do you see how well it works? Man, this thing works like a charm. I think it just needs a piece of silver foil on top to keep in the heat. Give it a little bit of a stir. But look how nicely that is cooking. Oh, wow. I'm just going to get a piece of silver foil or a lid or something to put over this. But it looks totally delightful. Well, we added a lid and some beans. Now we're going to add some wine, gravy, powder, and pepper. Let's give that a little bit of a stir in. Well, the Dakota fire hole is so wonderful and safe you can go to sleep with it on. Good night to you all.